Video is going to be about variables mostly, variable assignment and declaring them, stuff like that. Also escape sequences, I'm just going to mention that, what that is. And I just want to say something about printf and puts. But yeah, anyway, sorry about the sounds. It is load shedding, so that is the sound of the UPS. So yeah. So first I just want to say about output functions. Oh, that is... Huh. First I want to say about output functions. So I mentioned the printf statement where you say printf parenthesis and then something hi. So there's something also, there's also called puts. I don't think we've had to use it, but they did use it in the example once. So with puts, this thing is basically a printf with a line. So where you say print if hi in, that would print a new line. But you don't have to say print a new line with puts, because puts automatically puts a new line. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to escape sequences, which I have mentioned before. This in is an escape sequence. It just the names for certain things that just inserts little funky stuff, but yeah. So this is \n, and this makes a new line. So it just positions the cursor at the beginning of the next line. The cursor being this little thing, your computer mouse thing. So just your cursor being this thing that keeps flashing. You know, it's there and it's not. You know, when you're running the program, there's a thing that's just flashing on the screen. So that's your cursor. So this just puts your cursor at the beginning of the next line. So after this code is run, it just goes there. This is T. It's a horizontal tab. It moves the cursor to the next tab stop. I do not know what that means, but I'm just going through my notes. I haven't had to use this so far. This I have tried out. This is really fun. If you say this A, I think you have to say it inside a printf statement. Put an A there. So all these escape sequences you can use inside a print A. So if you say printf, not inside a print A, inside a printf. So any escape sequence you can use inside a printf. So things that you can put in here is that for the new line, this T, and this A. What the A does, it makes your laptop make a sound, which is really cool. I tried that, that's fun. If you put in this, let me just change this again. Double backslash, so it just inserts a backslash character in a string. If you do this, it inserts a double quotes character into a string. A string is basically just a sentence, so it's a bunch of words, but these things I mentioned. Oh, what on earth? These things I'm mentioning, I haven't had to use any of them so far. I'm just going through them. So the only one I've used so far is that one. This is a single quote. Sorry, that's not a single quote. It's double quote. That's single quotes. It inserts a single quote into a string. Or it positions the cursor at the beginning of the current line. So after the code, we just jump back there. And this inserts a question mark character. But these aren't so important to know. Just know about that one. The rest I haven't seen that being used at all. So now I'm going to talk about a bit about memory, or bits and bytes. So each memory cell, okay, so I'll put this way. Your computer is made up of a bunch of memory cells, and you can store things in there. And each of these memory cells has a unique address. And so let's say its address is actually just like houses. You can say this is 2 Green Street. And inside here, BT lives here. So PT is the value of the memory cell, and its PT's address is 2 Green Street. So in the same way, something has an address of numbers, it has an address, I don't know, maybe that's the address, and the value of this is maybe -1. So just keeping that in mind, we want to name a memory cell because we're going to use it. So when you name a memory cell, you call it, let's call this num1, I want to call it that. As soon as you name a memory cell, then it's called a variable. And each memory cell can only store a certain amount of values. So we work in chunks where 1 byte is 8 bits, and I think 8 bits means 2 to the power of 8, which is 256 possible outcomes, but that's what's so important. The main thing you know is, because you're programming, you have to say what you want to use, what you're going to call it, and what its value is going to be. So you want to use a variable. You want to say you want to do a bit of arithmetic in your program. You want to say, I want to calculate the sum of 2 numbers. That's just what you want to do. Now, if you want to do anything with these, you have to tell the computer that you're calling something sum, or you're calling something A and calling something B. So we have to declare variables. Now, how do we do this? We have to say what type of variable we want to be using. So just what type is it? So when you declare these variables, you say what type it is, and then you say what you're going to call it, and you can initialize this variable if you like. So when you're initializing a variable, oh, don't forget the semicolon. If you initialize a variable, that means you're saying there's a memory cell here. It has a certain value. Say it has the value 72. You don't know what this value is. You just know it's stored somewhere. So you're saying, okay, I want to declare a variable. So I'm just going to take a random memory cell. This is the one that the computer finds. It's going to call it A, and that's the value. Now, in order not to have any mistakes later when some memory cells have values that you don't know about, it's sometimes good to initialize a variable to, say, 0 if you're going to use it later for something. So it just takes it and replaces it with 0. One important thing to know is, in programming, this doesn't mean equals. This means get. So it just says variable A gets 0. Because you can say, basically you're saying here 72 is equal to, that's not true. This value of A had 72, now it just gets 0. Later we're going to talk about what this means and things like that. That just basically means, I'm just going to mention it now. So A gets A plus A. So this is like A gets A plus A and things like that. And that just says, and that's the same thing. Oh no, sorry, it's not the same thing. This just means A gets A plus 1. But I'll come back to that later. So there are different types of variables. An integer is an integer. So it's -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And because it's an integer, if you do any calculations with it, then the program will return an integer. So say now you divide an integer with another integer. If you say 3 divided by 4, and you declare them both as integers beforehand. So because both 3 and 4, if you declared 2 variables as integers and they had values of 3 and 4, and you were to divide them by each other, you would the program would return 0. Because what the program does when it does something like this, you know that it's obviously 0.75. But that's not an integer, and the program wants to return an integer. So it just rounds down to the closest one and just gives 0. So that's just something that it does, which is, you can use it for stuff, is pretty cool. So the other things, types of variables that you can declare is int. Then you get something called float. float you use when you want something that can store a lot more numbers. So if you want it to be 0.75, then you can use that, because a floating point number, that's what you use for this. They're basically numbers part of the real number system. They do stop after a certain number of decimal places because it doesn't have that much memory, but yeah, you get the float. Then you get a double, which has double the amount of space as a float. You can get even more decimal places, and then you get something as a long double. You must make a space here when you type it out. Oops. Then you get char. So this means a character. So if you want to declare, you're going to be using B, but when you use B, you're going to refer to a character being stored there. So if you were to say the program must return, so say now the user of the program had to input their favorite letter, and you're going to store it in B. So B is the address, and the value of this B is what's the person's favorite letter. Maybe it's Z. Z is the person's favorite letter, they inputted it, and the program stored it in the address B. So when you return B, the program will return Z, because that is the thing you stored there. So you stored a character, so that's char. I think it's also it takes up the least amount of memory. A char, it's I think 1 byte, not sure, but anyway, it's not that important. So other things that you also have is a long int, an unsigned int, an unsigned long int, and I think that is about enough that we need to know. But you always declare something there. So I want to call this num1 or something like that. So yeah, that is basically the different types. Just something I want to say about the arithmetic conversion rules of these type of thing. So if one of the value, if you're doing calculations, and you're saying now A divided by B, and if A is a long double, no matter what this is, the other ones also suddenly convert to a long double, and then the answer will be returned as a long double, I think. If one of the values is a double, the other ones are converted to double, and if one of the values is a float, the other one's converted to a float. So you get the picture. So if you divide an integer by a float, it will return a float value, as far as I know. So I'm going to be moving on to the next bit. I'd like to add as well, when you're writing a program, and say now, I'm just going to start a program, and say now, he said integer, you're going to be calling, you're going to be declaring some variables. So I'm declaring some variables, and it's always inside my main function. Everything always happens inside your main function. That's just how it is. So you declared these now, and I just want to say with regards to with how you write things. So you can, when you're writing the name of a variable, you can't leave spaces in between. It has to be one continuous thing. So they usually prefer if you say like one, this is called camel case, and then there is where you separate each word by underscores, so number 1, but it always starts with a lowercase letter, so everything's in lowercase, no spaces, and each time a new word starts you capitalize the first letter of it, or you can just do something like that on num1, but never a space. You can't say int. So this is just me declaring the type. This is the name of the variables. Int integer space 1. That's just no, don't do that. So you can either initialize them here and give them a value or something like that, or you can, in the next one, I'm just writing a program that's going to sum two numbers that I'm going to give here. Integer 1 equals 45, semicolon. Integer 2, excuse my handwriting, equals 72. So you can initialize them there. Another thing you can do about when you're declaring variables, you can also, if they're of the same type, declare them in one line. So you can say int integer 1 separated by comma, not a semicolon, integer 2 and sum. And then you can just add a comment. You're just initializing your variables. So yeah. So here, oh no, you're not initializing there, you're declaring it there. You're initializing it here. So here you're initializing the variables. Initializing just means assigning a value. So if I want to, what I want this program to do is to print out these two integers and then to print out the sum. So I'm going to say printf. These are just words that are going to be written out. First number is, I'm going to put in a space, and then I'm going to do this weird thing. So you can see this, what on earth is going on here. So sometimes you don't want to write in 45. You want the computer to say, okay, I want it to write out a certain thing, which is integer 1. Especially when you're writing a program where the user inputs a value and things like that, and you want it to print out the value, you're not going to know what that value is when you write the code. So you're just going to say, okay, well, print out whatever that is, which is stored there. So you always say %d. This is obviously just a new line, you don't have to put that there, but that's just how it is. So yeah, inside the printf statement, the double quotations, that is everything that's written out. After that, you say comma, and then whatever you refer to there. And then you close the parenthesis and you end with a semicolon. Say now you said printf first number is, and the other is, say comma first. Then you can see I refer to two things here. So you say, so with the thing that a computer does, it always executes something in chronological order. So it will look for this one first and then look for the second one. So then you say integer 1, comma, integer 2, close the parenthesis, semicolon. So basically it's saying it's going to print that one's value and then print the other one's value. So what's happening here is it's saying to print that value, and what value? The computer's going to say, what value you want me to print? Okay, what's the first thing you say after the comma? Okay, integer 1. So I'm going to print that, and I'm going to print that. Note, I'm not saying print the word integer 1. When I put them after this, I'm saying print the value of that, because that %d just means the value of the integer. I call it integers. I don't know what it is. Anyway, that thing is that d. Now I'm gonna perform some arithmetic. So in your code, you can say things like what's happening to these variables. So sum equals integer 1 plus integer 2 semicolon. You can do whatever with your variables because it's not being printed or anything. What you're just telling the computer is to perform some arithmetic. But what's important about any arithmetic in a computer is you can't say integer 1 plus integer 2 get sum, because as I said before, this is a get. So what are you saying here? Are you saying that gets sum and that also gets sum? This is just confusing, because what you're actually doing here is you want a certain variable to store that variable plus that variable. So whenever you do arithmetic in a program, you can only always have one variable to the left of the equal sign, which is now the get sign, apparently. So now I've stored these in there, and I'm going to say print the sum is, and then I say comma sum, because that's what I was referring to. I was referring to the value of this. So the value is going to be, when I add these together, it's going to print it out. I'm not in the mood to do maths. Let's just say it's 3 and 4. So when it prints out the sum, it's going to print out 7, which is cool. And then and semicolon. And obviously, when you're done with the I keep on doing that. When you're done with the program, you always say return 0 semicolon, and you close the brace. Another thing you can do is when you are doing these things and you don't want to make another variable sum, you can always do the following. Okay, you want to just print the sum now. The sum is, I'm going to use an integer here. I'm going to be printing an integer. Comma, what do I want it to return the value of? I wanted to return the value of integer 1 plus integer 2, because what it's going to do is going to perform that arithmetic, return an integer, and then display it there. So yeah, that's the things you can do. And that is, yeah, some more things about variables and printf statements. Okay, I'm just going to see what's next. Yeah, as I said before, you can initialize variables as well at the beginning as well. You can also say something like, I'm declaring int m, and also declaring int, I'm going to m and n. I'm also going to declare int r, which I'm going to initialize with the value of m plus n. You can do things like that. As I said before, variable names are later, you can use it, you can use variable names in a way that is in camel case. As I said before, they prefer it where you, I'm just repeating this because I see I wrote it down here. So camel case is legit, just camel case. When you give variables names, you can just give them things like that. But sometimes it's just easier if you say num1 and stuff like that. You just, the first letter of the next word is capitalized. Or you also just separate them with underscores, but they prefer that, or they prefer that you use, for variable names at the beginning, you just use camel case. So I think that's about it for this video. So that was about variables and just some basic coding again. The next video I'm going to talk about some arithmetic and scanf.